Wanna move my feet. carelessly. We should kill the space between you and me. Let's stop time. Can't you see that we're meant to be? Come with me tonight, you and I. Yeah, you know just what to do, and my eyes are set on you. Starlight, just shine. Yeah, you know you got the moves for me. Starlight.
Welcome. Welcome. It's really amazing to see all of you. I'm very, very proud. I mean, this is the largest homecoming that we ever had. It's great to see some people that were also here last year. We had much better weather, but fewer people, also great atmosphere. And I'm very, very happy that we are today going to celebrate the Frankfurt School community. Welcome, everyone. A lot of things have happened since the last time we saw each other a year ago for the homecoming. Some of the bad stuff that I'm going to put to the wayside for the moment, but a lot of great things to the Frankfurt School community. We founded a new Center for Entrepreneurship together with our alumni to support our student startups much, much better than we did in the past. We have also, improved the campus a lot during the last year. Not just a new caterer, Alliance Catering, that has received a lot of positive feedback already at the last homecoming, but also we have new study cubes throughout the campus, not just here in Frankfurt, but also in Hamburg. I'm also very, very proud that for the first time ever, we broke into the top 30 European business schools in the FT ranking. I think that also is a testimony to the job that the community is doing. And also, I think this is also extremely positive that we were actually able to welcome the largest student intake ever here on campus. So a lot of success stories. And I think what is important behind all of these successes and all these developments is that none of this would have been possible without the active support and the active involvement of our alumni community. All of you have helped us in various ways, being as a mentor for the startups, being a mentor for our students, helping us with the admission interviews, giving speeches for our students, helping us today for the workshops, and on and on and on. The list continues, and I want to thank you personally all for your involvement in our community. Thank you so much, and I think we should once again give this a heartfelt clap of our hands. Another major development is our new cooperation with the Frankfurt School Alumni Association that we signed in fall 2021. I'm very pleased that Jens is here with us today. He's also going to give us a speech later, is going to update us on our collaboration. And I really look forward to Jens' speech. And once again, also to everyone who is not yet a member of our Alumni Association, please make sure to join. You get additional benefits. It becomes much easier to get in touch with us. And also, we really appreciate your support there. So if you're not a member yet, we have a table outside where you can really easily sign up. And we need your support there as well. I think together we can also accomplish so much more, right? This is not the end of the journey. This is just the beginning of the Frankfurt School story. And I think Frankfurt School needs to get better each and every year. And I think today's homecoming is a testimony to this. Yes, the weather is not as brilliant as last year, but if I look at the workshops, if I look at the turnout, I think we really deliver on the promise to become better every year. You might have also noticed that there's a lot of construction going on in the neighborhood, right? To the west, there's actually, you can already see the building. This is where we are going to open our new dorms, hopefully in fall 2023. And that's desperately needed because students want to come back to campus. They want to come to the Frankfurt School, and we need to be able to house them. So this is, I think, a really significant step for the community, and it's going to also very nicely round off the entire campus. In 2024, there will be a hotel just around the corner. That is kind of like in front of the dorms. It's going to be 130 rooms there, and the Frankfurt School logo is going to be proudly on the facade of that new building. But it's not going to stop there. Many of you hopefully came by the subway and passed by the good old gas station and the McDonald's that is now closed down. You might have noticed the earth movers tearing down that building. And why are they tearing this down? Because Frankfurt School wants to expand. On that patch of land in 2025, 2026, we want to have our library, and we also want to have a joint campus together with other institutions from Frankfurt in order to support startups and also to promote a sustainability agenda for the local community here in Frankfurt. So a lot of things are happening. And we can all be very, very proud of accomplishing this together. So I already look forward to the next homecoming next year, where hopefully I'm able to update you again where we got better. But we also have to look beyond our community. Massive changes in the global order. I also want to personally thank every one of our alumni who contributed to the Frankfurt School Hardship Fund, because that enabled us to offer study places to refugees from the Ukraine. We are not just supporting them with study fees, but also with their living costs. And I just had coffee with one of these students earlier this week. And this would not have been possible without you. But there are lots of other changes going on, right? My sense is that this age of global integration that we have enjoyed since the early 1990s might actually come to an end. It might give way to an age of global fragmentation. And this is why I'm so pleased to have Rüdiger von Fritsch today as our keynote speaker. Mr. von Fritsch studied history and German studies in Erlangen and in Bonn before joining the German Foreign Service. And he had a distinguished career with postings all across the globe. He was also the vice president of the German Intelligence Service, the BND, right? So kind of like the German version of James Bond. And some Hollywood feeling. And I think also quite significant, his last station was as the German ambassador to Russia until 2019. He wrote a marvelous book called Zeitenwende. This is one of these German terms that are very difficult to translate into English. It's not just a turning point, it's a lot more. The times are changing and the world is changing. And I think the title of his keynote captures this very, very well. Tectonic shifts in the global economy and in politics. And I couldn't agree more, and I truly look forward to the keynote. Warm welcome to Rüdiger von Fritsch. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Professor Stieglitz, for this kind introduction and overall for the invitation and the occasion to share with you my perspective on these tectonic shifts. which are rooted in the war we are witnessing, a war that is not just happening 1,500 kilometers to the east of us, but which reaches us more and more. And each and every one of you probably will feel it in his professional life, and many do feel it also in their personal lives. It affects the competitiveness of our economies, it affects private life of citizens, and it puts to test the social cohesion of this country and of many countries. And in order to understand what is going on and what I do see as the potential consequences, I want to try to address three questions. The first should be, why has this war started? Or rather, and I'll explain why I use this term, why Vladimir Putin has started this war. The second question should be, where do we stand today and what could be the potential endgame? What could be the outcome? What could be the end of this war? And then the third question, what will be the consequences? And I would say partly notwithstanding how the war is going to end, because I do share Professor Stieglitz with what you have said about global fragmentation. Now, as for the first question, why had this war started? Why did Vladimir Putin start it? Of course, we could listen to extensive historic lectures and in-depth analysis. I just want to address one point which I consider to be extremely important in order to understand what's happening. We, and I use this somewhat blurry term of the West, and you'll understand what I'm talking about, and Russia have perceived very differently what has happened over the last 3 decades, since the fall of the Iron Curtain. And this is important to understand. Now, how have we witnessed and seen what was happening? Well, for the first time in history, for some of them at least, peoples were free to choose their own path, to decide their destiny, to take the right enshrined in the Charter of the United Nations, in the Charter of the OSCE, to decide their own fate for themselves, including, by the way, to join, to the extent they feel right, alliances to build their well-being, like the European Union, and alliances to ensure their national security, like the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. It is important to understand that what has happened, and I think this is objective history, was not that since the end of the Cold War, or with the Cold War already still ongoing, sort of there was a master plan of the West pulling over countries. Well, those countries deciding which way they wanted to choose. And for example, NATO was rather hesitant in the beginning, but the desire of these countries was to be as secure and as protected as possible. After the experience many of them had felt of decades of repression, of suppression, oppression by the Soviet Union. If you take a country like Latvia, they have an army of 6,500 soldiers. And on the other side is an army of 1 million, Russia. So it's understandable they wanted to go this way. I myself have lived in my young diplomatic years in socialist Poland, and in every discussions, of course, it was a clear statement that everybody said, how could you imagine if we should ever be free? I'm speaking about 1987, 88. If we should ever be free, we could choose a way leading us eastward again. It can only be towards parliamentary democracy, market economy, and the freedom of the West. Now, all this was perceived differently in Russia, because what happens in 1992, when the Soviet Union ends, is not only that communism ends, which is regretted by few only in Russia today, but it is the end and the fall of the Russian Empire, which at the given moment bears the name Soviet Union. And by this, the last colonial empire on earth. This is important to understand. An empire, colonial empire, that has not extended to Africa or Asia or Latin America, but over land. And it was, by the way, a German on the Russian throne, Catherine the Great, who in the 18th century once said, you can only protect Russia's borders by continuously extending them. Now, this is what Russia did, and what happens in the early 1990s, that many parts of this colonial empire decide to go their own way. Central Asia, the Caucasus, the Baltic states. and in the end, the heart of Russia, at least from the Russian perspective. And this is a territory, a historic territory, called by the Russians the Old Rus. The Old Rus encompasses the western part of Russia, Belarus, eastern Ukraine. And this is Russia's identity, because it was here that Russia developed its national identity 1,000 years ago, that Russia was Christianized, baptized in Kiev, by the way. Moscow wasn't even part then of the empire. And it can't be possible that this heart breaks apart. This is the perspective of many Russians, and it is even more so the perspective as Russia has not been able, or I would rather say allowed, to do one thing extremely important, to go a good way into the future, and this is to properly address your own history. This has not happened, and this leads to a situation where Russia constantly sort of identifies itself as being a victim of history, a victim of a huge master plan drawn up somewhere in Langley, Virginia by the CIA or so to destroy Russia, to demote Russia, to humble Russia. You can only feel this, and you can only feel this so strongly if you feel yourself only a victim. It is not being properly addressed what was Russia's doing in all this, having been a colonial empire. What were the shortcomings of the Soviet Union that was not sort of pushed over, but that collapsed out of its own deficiencies and shortcomings, stagnation, repression, economic deficiencies, etc. And this feeling as being a victim is very strong on the mind of this one man, Vladimir Putin. And I want to try to look into his head in order to understand why he has started this war. And I would see three motives that guide him, or three factors. The first is a specific view of geopolitics, which I have already described. That the West was planning, and successfully did, building sort of a counter-empire against Russia. Everything's directed against Russia, pulling the others over, weakening Russia. Objectively, of course, Russia was weakened after 1992, falling apart, not having the same position on the international stage any longer, and with important economics, parts of its economy being in the newly independent states like in Latvia or Ukraine or others. And it is telling that Vladimir Putin once said, the collapse of the Soviet Union was the biggest and most dramatic event that happened in the 20th century. And later being asked to clarify, he said, it's also because so many Russians do live abroad. And this is permanently being made an issue. Yes, 25 million Russians all of a sudden live in independent countries like Uzbekistan or Estonia or so. And again, this is something that is being done to Russia. And it's not being asked, why has it happened? Because Stalin put these people there 70 years ago. Because Russia was a colonial empire. But it's all something that is to the detriment of Russia that is happening. And this specific perspective on geopolitics of Russia being constantly under pressure, under potential attack, is very strong on his mind. This is geopolitics. Now, the second motive, and that has grown over the years in his mindset, is sort of a grand Russian imperialist design. He has dealt more and more over the years with history. He has published articles on this, and particularly you can notice that in Corona times, COVID times, he was isolated more than any other important leader from the outside, and he published again articles, and he had a specific view on Russia, particularly on the fact that Russia couldn't fall apart, that Ukraine was not a proper country but belonged to Russia, etc. Now, the third factor we have to bear in mind, I think, is his personality. Who is Vladimir Putin? Now, he once himself put it very clearly. He said, once KGB, always KGB. He is a trained Soviet Secret Service agent, and his mindset is that of a Secret Service agent. What does that mean? It's a world full of conspiracies constantly directed against you, against your country, and against your power. And he repeatedly has very clearly stated that this is the way he sees it. And if you look at the world that way, then you have a blind spot. And the blind spot is that whatever happens according to your view of the world cannot possibly happen because there is sincere dissatisfaction somewhere, but only because there is this master plan. If the people of Ukraine in 2013 rebel against their president who had promised to take their country towards the European Union and takes a 180-degree turnaround, people take to the streets. According to Vladimir Putin's mindset, this can only be because the West has organized this. When sort of meeting this argument in Moscow, and I did frequently, I used to reply, I wished we were as clever and as successful as you perceive us to be. Because all grand designs, as we know, fail in face of reality. Now, but this is his mindset. And he is, and this is important also to bear in mind, a typical autocratic leader. Today, I would even say Russia has become a dictatorship. It's not an autocracy any longer. But what does that mean? A successful autocratic leader, and he, of course, considers him to be successful, having been in power for over 20 years, is not controlled by anybody. In the old days of the Soviet Empire, you had a Politburo, and if Nikita Khrushchev didn't do well, he was put away. The last days of East Germany, Erich Honecker was taken out. There is nobody who controls him, and equally important, there is nobody giving proper advice. Because the nature of such an autocratic rule is to keep your power by three rather simple tools, or well-known tools, over your country. Repression, bribery, and the big lie, propaganda. Bribery happens through constantly buying the support of the people. Problems are not really being solved, but being bought out, or being put down by repression. And it's the same tools he more or less governs his entourage with and keeps them under control. Now, of course, if you're Sergei Lavrov, you do know the reality. You do not believe in propaganda, but it doesn't take much cynicism to put this aside and to make sure that you do not lose your influence, you do not lose your position, and that you do not lose your fortune. Because part of his rule is that he allows a certain circle around him to constantly steal the country. So everybody around him constantly is in fear of what would happen if I give wrong advice. And what happens is that you give that kind of advice of which you believe that a great leader would like to hear it. And this leads to dramatic misperceptions of reality. And this brings me to my second overall point: where do we stand today and what could be the end game of all this? It has led, as we have seen, to dramatic misperceptions of the strength of the Russian army, of the strength of the Ukrainian army, and the readiness to fight for the country's independence. It has led to a dramatic misperception, thirdly, of the attitude of Ukrainians. When I was in Moscow, we were constantly told, but you must understand, we are brothers, we belong together. They want to be with us again. And we used to reply, well, if they're your brothers, don't beat them so hard. But it's always about big brother and little brother. It's about Moscow and Kiev, and we tell them where to go. And they actually did believe that if they would take out this Nazi leadership in Kiev, open bracket, not only the president, also the leader of the opposition is Jewish, close bracket, the country would run back into the arms of Mother Russia. And fourthly, his misperception was about the nature of the reaction of the West. He knew well in advance what would be coming his way, and he nevertheless started to wage this war. Also because he, in part, as his overall political ambitions and goals are so important, is ready for quite some self-damage, because politics is more important than economy. And all those who in these days advocate, but we should try to talk to them to ensure energy supply, and maybe we can have some sort of deal, are completely wrong, because they're wrong about the nature of the regime. He's not ready for economic deals. It's about his political goals. And these goals he had set out before starting the war. Some are very obvious in the daily news and in our analysis of it. He wants part of the territory of Ukraine. But he furthermore wants to subjugate Ukraine. He wants to decide about Ukraine's future. But a third goal, very often today in public debate, is being forgotten, which he had set out very clearly. He wants to change the international order to his advantage and our disadvantage. And this goal he hasn't given up. He had clearly stated it with demands to the West before he started the war. And he's still pursuing it. Therefore, it's a war also about us, about our future, about the nature of our economies, about our political freedom. And why did he decide to wage war in order to change this order? Because the analysis in Moscow had become very clear that Russia, more and more, was getting into a weaker position internationally. Now, this may surprise us. We know how rich Russia is, how influential Russia is. It has nuclear arms, etc. But in comparison, Russia is completely falling back and will so even more over the years to come. Because due to the political nature of the system, Russia's economy proved to be unreformable. Efforts were undertaken constantly to reform an economy that is a model that is completely outdated, which lives on huge revenues coming from the export of fossil fuels, and which has not managed to transform its wealth into a productive economy. Very typically, I do remember one day in one of his usual addresses twice a year, he ordered his government to raise the percentage of small and medium-sized enterprises in Russia. It was at 25%, not very impressive, but nevertheless, and he said, I want you to raise it to 30. 2 years later, they were at 20. It's unreformable because of the political nature and because very deep down he, of course, knows if he would unleash entrepreneurial spirit, people would be economically independent tomorrow and would be demanding political reforms the day after tomorrow. And this is something he doesn't need. And those around him, neither. And it is not only that Russia is sort of falling back in competitiveness, in innovation, in the future of its exports, in comparison to the West, but also, and this is important to understand, in comparison to China. China that has demonstrated to Russia how you can successfully build a successful economy on an autocratic system. So if you cannot muster any influence any longer on that, you take the last tool you have and you bang the table. This is what he did. And he failed miserably, as we know. Because none of those goals he has achieved, and most of those it's hard to imagine he could possibly achieve. And through this, a fourth goal has come on his agenda too, which he's pursuing right now, and this is why there is so little readiness for a negotiated settlement. And which is this? Vladimir Putin in this war is fighting for his own political survival. If you have decided without proper advice, without any control, on such a war, if you're making such promises, you can't bring home a bad compromise. And this will make the solution of this war so difficult. Because the fundamental goals of both parties of war are so contradictory. Russia wanting to subjugate Ukraine and go beyond, threaten us, maybe uses aggression against other countries, and Ukraine not being ready to give up on its sovereignty, not giving up on its territory. This explains also why mediation that has been tried has had so little success. A country like Israel, having good ties to both sides, has tried. Turkey has tried. The United Nations Secretary General has come home empty-handed. And most telling is the fact that the one country that would be best in a position to negotiate a settlement is sitting on the sidelines, China. China maintains good ties to Kiev and to Moscow, and if you have followed the meeting of Putin and Xi Jinping the day before yesterday in Samarkand, Uzbekistan, you could exactly see where China stands, and I'll come to China in a moment. So, my overall take is this war is difficult to be brought to an end, and we probably are in for some protraction of it maybe for months to come or even longer. Of course, one outcome of war can always be a ceasefire, a draw. Both parties get tired and say, let's settle for a draw. But what matters in a draw is who holds leverage. Can Ukraine subscribe on the dotted line to an agreement which allows Russia to tell Ukraine, if you don't do this, we'll start again? No, of course not. So this is what would matter in such an agreement. Volodymyr Zelensky himself had proposed such a settlement. Very early on in the war, he said, let's agree a ceasefire, and beyond that, agree to disagree, which diplomatically, historically, is a good solution. You can extend such settlements into history. The West had never recognized the annexation of the Baltic states, and here they are again. On Taiwan, basically the international community has agreed to disagree with China, and they have fantastic economic ties, and it works well, etc. So this could have been possible. Russia is not ready for that. It's about Russia caving in, and Vladimir Putin can't cave in. And this brings me to my third overall point. What are the consequences, at least as I see them, that will be with us as a result of this war? Now, my first take is that the overall vectors, the dynamics of the international order will not fundamentally change for the time being. With one exception, one man has decided to take his country out of this order and lead it into isolation. But beyond that, what will, as you can imagine it today, most probably happen? The global south will try to continue to keep up, to catch up. Globalization has been in the interest of the global south. They have profited fantastically from it. And we were well advised for our own interests, and we should be well advised in the future to try to support that to the extent possible. And to see the specific interests of individual actors in the south. These days in talk shows you sometimes hear, now look, 2/3 of the world population are not on the side of the West. This is arithmetics, it's not politics. I give you one example. I take out 1 million of the world population. India. Where does India stand? You could also see this in the Samarkand meeting when Modi met with Putin. And Modi at least said, wars are not the solutions for our problems today. Very brave already. Overall, India has a major challenge. That's China. Who's China's best friend? Russia. So rather not be on too bad terms with Russia. Who is India's most important supplier of arms? Russia. So there you see India's position. And we in our future politics have to bear in mind and take into consideration these individual positions and nevertheless try to build bridges and ties as good as possible with the countries of the South. The West stands more united than ever. One of the many self-damages Vladimir Putin has inflicted to his interests and the reaction of countries. Take only Germany. He has succeeded in a 180-degree turnaround of German politics within a few days. When Chancellor Scholz took to the Bundestag and said, stop, we're going to spend enough money to be able to defend ourselves, to defend our partners. And we end sort of the last remainder of World War II. In future, we are going to supply countries that are being aggressed upon with arms. Unthinkable of before. One of the many self-inflictions. The West stands united. And you all have in your mind now a great but, and you're right. Because we are lucky that in the current situation, it is Joe Biden who's in the White House. And we do not know who will be in the White House in 2 years from now. And by the way, it was Donald Trump and what he considered to be foreign policy, which was not foreign policy, that also paved the way for Russia's perception of how the West is. He inflicted sanctions without end on Russia. He ended the INF Treaty. He stopped disarmament talks, etc. And we do not know who's going to be in the White House in 2 years from now, whether it will be Donald himself or another Donald. who will on the spur of the moment decide to be friends with Russia or to leave NATO or whatever, have a tendency to be less hegemonial and more isolationist. And therefore, this war must be the big wake-up call for the Europeans. Europe is a fantastic success story. We always talk about our quarrels of today. But looking back, we know where we have come from in terms of economic integration, common currency, all the freedoms we have, etc. But we, as you know, are weak on common foreign and security policy. This we must address. And this dramatic crisis we are in has brought Europe closer to being ready to agree on that. Now, we are a huge tanker, as you know, and it's difficult to agree among 27. But if you take the positions recently taken by sort of these two heavyweight member states, France and Germany, recently, you see the direction we might be moving. And you might now find a greater readiness in countries to join in on common foreign and security policies, countries that sometimes are not so easy partners. Take Poland. Poland feels under enormous threat right now. And Poland knows that, yes, you could rely on a Donald Trump-led United States, but this is a shaky thing. Poland had already to experience that, or you team up with the European Union. So the West stands united for the time being, and the Europeans must do their homework. And if I speak about the vectors and dynamics, of course, there is China. Now, many do say China is the one who is profiting from this conflict. China will rise and having Russia on its side, etc. Yes, it's true. China does like a situation where the old West, and that includes Russia, is taking itself apart. This is to China's favor. China finds it interesting that Russia is weakening herself dramatically even further, having been a junior partner in the so-called strategic partnership already before. Just take the size of the economies. China being, after the consolidated European Union, number 2 on the world stage, and the size of the Russian economy being about that of the state of New York, somewhat smaller than Italy. So you see the nature of the partnership. Yes, it is in China's favor, but there is a lot that is not in China's interest. China doesn't like to be shown on the international arena or the international community reacts to aggression of that nature. Now, of course, from China's perspective, Taiwan is a different thing. We all know it's sort of just a province that should be re-included. It's not really annexation or so. But they're being clearly shown the nature of the readiness of the West, though it's on a different sheet, how we could potentially react to Chinese aggression towards Taiwan in comparison to our potential reaction to Russia. If Volkswagen has to close down its Russia business, which it did, they can survive, but they do make 40% of their revenue in China. So, but that's another story. This is not in China's interest, being shown that. It's not in China's interest that Russia has shaken the international arena altogether. China doesn't need recession and inflation in Western countries. It needs a stable environment to expand economically and through this politically. And China doesn't like Vladimir Putin very much for trampling on one of the main trajectories of the Silk Road, and this is through Russia. This is gone. So all this is not in China's interest. And if you look at the details of Sino-Russian relationship these days, it's very interesting to read how China reacts. Sino-Russian trade has grown fantastically this year. Yes, because Vladimir is selling oil and gas to China. But at what price? China has managed a fantastic rebate. And even India, being as dependent as I tried to illustrate, has managed to get a rebate. And the nature of this trade of China and Russia is Russian exports that have made it grow. Chinese imports to Russia, no. Last year, China and Russia agreed on 2 billion Chinese investment in the Silk Road in Russia this year. Not a single yuan has flown. The Chinese government makes sure that Chinese companies Do not go into projects of cooperation or exports into Russia, which might violate Western sanctions. Because Russia, before the war, had been 2% of China's foreign trade, and the US alone 14%. So China is well weighing the situation, but for the time being doesn't know a way out. I said the vectors and the dynamics of the international order, as I at least look at it, are not changing. But the nature, and that leads me to the fragmentation Professor Stieglitz mentioned, the nature of the international order will change. And I mostly see twofold. The nature of globalization, of course, will change. Whether you call it re-globalization or slowbalization, what we will see is that after an era of free trade, we'll rather see huge trade blocs trying to secure their interest and compete with each other, and we're back into the discussions about rules and standards and regulations, etc. This will be with us, and the Shanghai Cooperation Organization is one such effort to build this. We see this kind of fragmentation. We see the discussion high up on the agenda of each and every of our companies, if they are of some size, about resilience, building resilience, not being dependent only on one supplier or one place of investment. Not leave China, but see whether we could do something in Portugal as well. And the second factor that marks the change of nature of the international order is the fact that on 24th of February this year, Vladimir Putin has turned over the chessboard. He doesn't accept the rules any longer. And which were the rules? The rules were that we were trying to build security, well-being, with sometimes conflicting interests amongst us on this huge Eurasian landmass through dialogue, compromise, negotiated settlements. And we have done so successfully since the second half of the Cold War. Think of the disarmament talks, of arms reductions agreements, of the CSCE, signed in 1974. And we continued this with Russia right to the end. Russia's first war on Ukraine, 2014, was settled diplomatically, the Minsk agreements. And when Russia started to threaten this war, the West resorted once again to these tools. And everybody who could walk traveled to Moscow, making proposals, etc., etc. And he created the impression, yes, he wanted to settle that way. 9 days before he has his troops invade Ukraine, on stage, he tells German Chancellor Olaf Scholz in a press conference, yes, these recent tensions we should try to settle in the framework of the Minsk agreement. He has turned the chessboard, and he has led us, and this is what is going to mark the new era. He's led us from an era where we have settled dividing interests, conflicts in dialogue into an era of confrontation. This is what we are in. And this will be the challenge for Western countries to try to put order to confrontation again, because this must be the minimum in international relations. This is what we did successfully in the 1970s. Also beyond this conflict, try with Russia, be it as confrontational as it is, and we can't wish it away, it's going to be there, and maybe with Vladimir Putin, try to come to terms, put order to confrontation. But part of this confrontation also is to take up the glove he has thrown. Because what is his concept of international order? It is 19th century. It's the great powers sitting around the tables and telling the little ones where to fall off the sofa on the left and the right. This has ended in 2 dramatic wars in the 20th century. This concept has failed, but he tries it again, defining zones of interest, buffer zones, etc. And it is up to us to be on the side of those countries he wants to make his sphere of influence, his buffer zone. Not only to stand on the side of Ukrainians, but also keep an open eye and readiness on Georgia, on Moldova, on the Western Balkans and other, and try to put order to this confrontation. With this, I come to my last point, and where will be Russia in future? What will become of Russia? Over the last days, we had many news. There is protest in Russia. There is dissatisfaction. Now, journalists, of course, always have a tendency, wherever they see something, to blow it up into a big story. Let's not overestimate what happened in terms of sort of civic liberty protest. This is very brave. But it is not, as I read it, sign of a growing sentiment against the regime. Because he has fantastic control with repression, with bribery, and with the big lie. But we aimed at his means of bribery. This is why the sanctions are rightly directed at his income and his revenue. He constantly needs to keep up power, not only to finance this war, but to keep up power. And he, in his readiness to do self-damage, to put political over economic goals, therefore has escalated. He has escalated militarily. He has escalated in cyber, trying to influence our countries to take us apart. He has escalated by stopping grain exports. And after hesitating for 4 months, this is interesting to see, after we had decided to implement sanctions on not importing oil and gas, oil and lignite, he used his strongest tool and turned off the gas tap. And the game he's playing right now is who is going to hold his breath longer. Because he needs these revenues. And let's not be fooled by the huge figures of Russian income right now. They're price-driven, they're not quantity-driven. And we see as new suppliers are able to bring prices down. An export of fossil fuel, as we all know, is dependent on infrastructure. You can't put gas on a lorry and drive it over to India. So this is not going to work forever. But his hope clearly is to take us apart before that. Therefore, it's so important not only to stand strong, to be ready to bring sacrifice, to take up this confrontation, but to have an eye on the social cohesion of our countries and of the plight of those who suffer most from what is happening. So he can still do this without popular unrest. I do not expect sort of a large-scale, countrywide protest against him. But you can never exclude. And he himself is clearly afraid of that. Otherwise, his regime wouldn't be as repressive. Yes, he is afraid of Alexei Navalny. This is why he put him behind bars. But I think he's most afraid of Lech Wałęsa, the Polish electrician who in 1979, and whom nobody knew, climbed the gate of a shipyard and said, "Enough is enough." And a year later, had a trade union in Poland of 12 million members. The Black Swan. He's afraid of the Black Swan. But still, in Russia, there is an old question from Soviet time that matters today too, and this is, who will win? The fridge or the TV set? For the time being, the TV set is winning, the propaganda. But in a given situation where he's running out of money, where he's getting into difficulties, supplying the population with pharmaceuticals, with school nutrition, with health system, etc., you cannot exclude that there will be some spark igniting a movement. What I consider more likely, rather, if there should be opposition to what he is doing, that it would come from amongst his leadership. Now, as I said, he has managed to fragment it, to keep it under control, but particularly in the army. Of course, there is an idea about what an army and about what the Russian army should be doing. And if sacrifices and successes outweigh, or lacking successes outweigh progress, then there might be a balance taken by some officers, and somebody might fall into Putin's arm and try to change course. What would this mean? Yes, this war maybe could be stopped, but I would assume that beyond that we would be faced with a new leadership that is equally repressive, authoritarian, and as confrontational as it had been in the past. So, unfortunately, I haven't come to spread good news. But I want to end by stating something that always matters to me. I personally do have a great sympathy for Russia. for the Russian people, the Russian culture. I personally have biographical roots in Russia, and I promised myself I'll never give up on that. And we should never leave the confidence and the hope on these and the bonds we have had with these. And particularly, never lose the confidence that we, yes, do know the problems of today, but we never know the solutions of tomorrow. And history is long and winding. And diplomacy is about climbing the wall 19 times, falling down 19 times, and climb it up 20th time. Diplomacy is ready, but it takes two to tango. Thank you so much for your attention so far. Thank you.
Hello? Okay. Also im Namen der Frankfurt School, thank you very much for this very deep information about what can be, what could be, and what has been. Thank you very much. And now it's up to you. We have got, if anybody of you does have any questions, just to raise your hands and we will come to you. Okay, we start.
Thank you, Mr. von Frisch, for the very engaging speech. I'm originally from Russia and I've been living in Germany for 7-8 years. My father is from Ukraine, so it's a topic that is interesting to me from personal as well as work side. I have a question that I don't expect you to answer, but probably you can shortly comment the partnership agreement that Ms. von der Leyen, I think you know what I'm talking about, just signed up with Azerbaijan for delivering gas. And now when we're talking about aggression of Russia, aggression of Azerbaijan has been there also pretty for a long time, and the last messages that we saw from the leader are very similar to what Vladimir Putin posted, totally inhumane, aggressive, not compliant or even comparable to the values we are representing and we're living by. I was taken aback by this, and that the no comments came around it. And the message that we're happy about this partnership really hurt me as living in Europe and identifying myself as a European. I don't expect a comment, as I said, but maybe.
I'm in retirement. I'm a free man to comment everything. The Azerbaijan-Armenian conflict is very interesting to follow these days. It's tragic, it's dramatic what is happening. And it shows the limits of Russia's abilities, because they usually would be defending the Armenians. And Turkey supporting the Azeris, which shows also where Turkey stands. Russia doesn't do. There are limits to what it can do. And yes, you're right, Azerbaijan is a dictatorship too. The messages coming from Baku are aggressive. And still we have partnerships, you're right. Now, politics is about trying to bring your values and rules we have agreed to jointly, combining or bringing it together with reality. Take the example of us buying gas from Russia. Yes, the Germans have become very dependent. What would have been the alternative? In us needing gas for our famous energy turnaround, the Energiewende, would have been to buy gas democratically from democratic country. We could have bought gas from Liechtenstein or Luxembourg or Switzerland. Yes, Norway. But then it ends. The largest 4 gas producers on the world are China, Qatar, India, and Russia. And there then is this dirty fracking from the US that Germans didn't want to. So if you have to deal with reality, you have to also deal with dictators somehow. And to just add one thing, there are politicians who say we can never talk to Putin again. You should never say this. Maybe in a situation after this war, he will still be there. And as I said, Russia is not going to go away. And we somehow need to deal with this country as we need to deal with China these days. And we know about China's internal situation, about the suppression of the Uyghur and other. But you have to make arrangements. This is sometimes very hurting. But politics and diplomacy very often is in a situation where it cannot take either decision without becoming guilty. You're either guilty morally, or you're guilty in a criminal sense, or because you strike a deal, or you don't do anything and you hurt the interests of your population. This is unfortunately the reality of politics and diplomacy. But we must always be guided not only by reality and become cynical, but also by our values to the extent possible. This is the way I see it.
Herr von Fritsch, thank you for your very inspiring speech. You said fairly early on that Russia or Putin was sort of marking up his expectations of what was to come his way. And you said sanctions. I still have the impression that we, particularly in Germany, we're sort of, we have the speech given by Mr. Scholz, Zeitenwende, like your book. But if we look at the actual actions after those speeches, we're not really owning up to our biggest economy of Europe role that we should play. Mm-hmm. And it's being us edged on by the US, by the UK, by France, saying, take more responsibility. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So what's your view in terms of, are we really owning up to that responsibility? Are we really supporting Ukraine to the extent necessary and possible? Mm-hmm. Or are we just paying lip service and saying, we're there for you to help and we're doing humanitarian help, but we're not really helping with weapons because we're still scared of what happened 70 years ago?
A very pertinent question. Now, Zeitenwende, this turning point in history, is not something that happens on the spur of a moment. It is a process. Sort of, there were decisions taken on very early on, very dramatically, fundamental decisions, but to swing around is extremely difficult, particularly if you have neglected your own armed forces for so long and then all of a sudden should deliver arms. Now, nevertheless, taken quantity, Germany is the second biggest supplier of arms to Ukraine. That should not be overlooked. It's often being overlooked if discussions are there which I lose to understand, which I fail to understand, because is this tank apt and adequate for Eastern Ukraine or not, and should it be this size or that size? And so I myself can't judge on that. But overall, I think we do a lot, and what will particularly take time, also in public consent to politics, which after all is not unimportant, is the sort of mentality of being ready to take up leadership which is expected from us and which can only be, of course, a leadership amongst equal in consensus with European partners, amongst NATO partners, or so on. I do see sort of very good signals given by current politics. If you take the statements, for example, particularly from our Minister of Foreign Affairs. She's very clear on that. But again, it's not something you do tomorrow. Chancellor Scholz delivered a speech a week or 10 days ago in Prague, and he clearly outlined where he could see Europe tomorrow and where he, with his country, would be ready to follow. Because only if you indicate where are your sort of lines of compromise, what would you be ready to give up, the others might fall in. So I think we are starting well, but it will be a process.
Thank you. Just for information, we've got 2 more questions, and then we...
Thank you for a very enlightening and insightful lecture. I live in London, and we have a cost of living crisis, as you might have followed the news. The government has decided to bail out by borrowing money, 150 billion. So there is already questions about how much support we can provide, and the energy dependency will be a major factor. So do you see, my question is, do you see any risk of countries in the EU doing some backhand deals with Putin to become more energy sufficient? Because, if you look at the likes of India, they are enjoying the benefits of sanction, so to speak, getting fuel cheaper. Thank you.
Again, a very pertinent question. Of course, this is clearly what Vladimir Putin is aiming at, trying to take us apart as countries and take apart the society in our countries. And he, in a very traditional manner, is building up all sorts of theaters of fear. And we must not fall into the trap of the fear he is building up. We must clearly indicate that we are standing tall. And we must communicate in our countries and societies that giving in to him here and there and striking an individual energy deal, etc., would only encourage him to go on. Will only encourage him in his overall belief that in the end he is stronger. Because we are all weaklings. And he is the ultimate defender of a strong European spirit. He's defending, I don't know what, Christianity and whatever, and so on, a traditional role of women, or you have it. And that he, through this strength, which he feels, and which he feels his country has, he can bring us to our knees. I do see this danger. I do see it in some countries stronger than in others. And this is a huge challenge for all governments. They must communicate sort of the overall picture, the nature of the confrontation we are in, and ahead of the crisis community that we will not sail through this without sacrifices. And that those stronger in our societies must be ready to bear a bigger burden than the weak ones. Because he is, of course, counting on them. He is hoping that the yellow vests we saw in France and which were cheered in Russia when I was there will be dancing through the streets of Copenhagen, Magdeburg, and Edinburgh tomorrow. So it's a huge task, and it's difficult to foresee where we'll lead. On Monday, I'm giving lectures sort of every day these days. I was in Thuringia, Chamber of Commerce, and the same amount, the audience was as big as this, and there were 300 entrepreneurs. And as we say in German, their roof was burning. It was on fire. Because they're all small, they're all suffering from energy prices, and in discussions after the lecture, then you note that sort of this economic fear is sort of swinging over in political motivation. Why should we continue to help these Ukrainians? Why should we fuel this war? Why don't we open this Nord Stream 2 to get more gas? Which is silly, by the way. If he wanted to supply gas, he has enough pipes already here. It's all about politics in the end. Yes, but I do share your concern.
Or becoming militaristic, for example, sailing in waters where we may not be allocated or should not get too strong and interfere.
Again, this is sort of the same challenge. Individual countries trying to go their extra way. Just take Turkey, for example, to speak of NATO and Turkey's position, which is very complicated. They try to profit from it, whilst at the same time, we spoke about the Armenian-Azeri conflict, having conflicting interests with Russia there, having conflicting interests in Syria, having conflicting interests in Ukraine, because Erdogan is a patron saint of the Tatar minority on Crimea, etc. So we must bear this in mind, and we must see that individual countries sort of will try to profit also because they prefer to go a populist way, like Hungary. To be very frank, I think somehow the Europeans altogether and Europe can do with some irritation, to put it diplomatically. But if the French electorate would have voted for Madame Le Pen, or if the Italian electorate should now bring in a government that should maybe pursue a different path on Russia policy, then the situation will get very difficult. Sort of the large partners have to somehow follow the same path and agree on that. But again, I come to my final point. We always see the problems and don't see the solutions of tomorrow. I have worked myself for 5 years in the structures of the European Union and the German representation to the EU. And what always surprised me and impressed me, that in the end, there is a bunch of people being very imaginative and finding fantastic solutions to seemingly unsolvable problems. And we have done so in the past. I use this picture that we're a huge tanker slowly steering course. And overall, I continue to be optimistic that also in future we will be able to stick together as Europeans and sail a good course.
Ganz herzlichen Dank, das war ganz gut.
Again, a big thank you for sharing your thoughts and the interesting insight, Mr. von Fritsch. Also, from my side, a warm welcome to this very special occasion, your FS Alumni Homecoming. For those who don't know me yet, I'm more than happy to introduce myself. My name is Lisa Ronneborger, and I'm Director of Student and Alumni Affairs here at Frankfurt School. It is really great to see so many of you here today for your homecoming. It is not only a moment of happiness and probably some nostalgia, but also an opportunity to reflect on learnings and achievements. You have established yourself as successful individuals, and we could not be prouder of that and how you shaped the society and our institution. That priceless connection of belongings is underpinned by your presence here today. No matter when and where you graduated, you're all sharing the same memory of studying at Frankfurt School a couple of years or even longer ago. You spent significant time with us on this campus, on one of our older campuses, or even at one of our national locations. So why don't we see where you actually have been studying and have shared memories of your time at Frankfurt School? You just need to raise your hands. No one has to speak up, so don't be shy. Let's start with those who have not studied in Frankfurt. Everyone, I want to see your hands up if you have joined us in one of our national locations, from the north in Hamburg up to the south in Munich. Hands up. All right. Welcome to Frankfurt. It's not that many, though. Now that we are coming to Frankfurt, for those who don't know our history, we have had several locations in Frankfurt. So I will start with the very first one, which was Sternstraße. Hands up for those of you who studied at Sternstraße. Wow, okay. I'm going to share a memory of Sternstraße, hopefully, in a second. Thank you very much. After Sternstraße, we moved to Sonnemannstraße, and some of you might even have to raise 2 times the hands if you have joined us in 2 different locations. So hands up for those who joined us as Sonnemannstraße. By the way, I started at this time, so I have to put up my hand as well. Okay, this is quite some people. And now, who has studied at this campus here at Adickes-Allee? Hands up. Okay, this is still quite most of the people in the room. Thank you very much for sharing. I think you all have seen people sitting next to you, but also a little bit more far away. It's not only about sharing your own memories from the same locations, also to getting to know those of you who have been studying at a different location and probably other memories of their time studying at Frankfurt School. Anyhow, I'm pretty sure that you would agree with me that it was not all about studying at Frankfurt School. You hopefully got to know your classmates who might have replaced the comfort zones of your familiar homes, and you have brought up friendships that still exist today. You partied together. I can even myself remember all the nice parties in the courtyard at Sonnemannstraße, but I also know that at Sternstraße there were some really nice parties. I love the story. I've never been there at this time, but I love the story that I always get told by alumni, that the water came from the roof when you partied too hard. So I kind of missed that memory, but it's a really nice story that you always share with me. And now comes the good thing. Also in your alumni life, there's many opportunities where we can generate such moments together. Together with the Frankfurt School Alumni Association, we accompany throughout your alumni life. You can join us at many various decentralized events, and we will be regularly visiting you in Hamburg, Berlin, Leipzig, Düsseldorf, Köln, Stuttgart, Munich. I probably forgot some of the locations that we are coming very shortly or just have been visiting this year. Of course, there's also plenty of events happening here in Frankfurt. But you can also share and join us in one of our online sessions. Stay tuned to Frankfurt School. The offer to meet and expand your network, but also gain more insights and knowledge is something that covers most of our events. There's a wide range of topics to continue growing and learning. The concept of lifelong learning motivates people to continuously develop themselves and take on new challenges that arise in a volatile world. I think we have just talked about this. Therefore, our executive education team is always searching for new ways to deliver education in an increasing audience. Today, I would especially like to thank you, those of you who are also engaging in our FS family. Professor Stieglitz mentioned some of the opportunities when sharing your experiences in one of our guest speeches to students, or serving as a mentor, meeting a mentee for the very first time, or offering job opportunities to our current students, or serving the Alumni Association. As mentioned, Frankfurt School and the Frankfurt School Association have decided end of last week that we will continue our journey jointly in a cooperation. And I'm very happy to say that we started a very fruitful and enriching cooperation for joint alumni work. Therefore, today I would like to thank the Association Board and, as a representative of the Association Board, Jens, today, for their passion for the alumni community, their belief in Frankfurt School and our joint alumni community and work, the endless time and commitment. I normally receive emails after midnight from them, and their patience with us to further develop a joint alumni strategy. Jens, yours, as well as the engagement of the whole association's board, is very much appreciated. Thank you very much. I'm very much looking forward to working with you, but also with everyone else in our alumni community to continue and grow our network. Saying this, Jens, the stage is yours.
Well, thank you, Lisa, for those kind words. And I'm looking forward to a couple of minutes to explaining you guys what we are doing in the FS Alumni Association. But beforehand, I want to use this audience and everyone, all the alumni, to say thank you also to Frankfurt School, more specifically not only the management, but also the people behind Lisa's team, the FS Alumni Relationship team, Judith, for instance, who made this possible. And I think before starting my speech, I think that's a big applause for their work. Thanks for that. And I think there's more to come today and tonight. Yeah. So we're all looking forward. A few words to myself. Lisa already introduced me. My name is Jens. I'm with the Alumni Association since 2016. So right after graduating in my bachelor, I moved in the board of the association. And now since 2020, I'm heading the board of the association. In between, I also did an MBA of the school, so there's quite some connectivity to all of you, and I think we share some thoughts together and some experience together. And with my more than 10 years of experience with the university now, let me start to give you also an impression of we all learn together, we all develop professionally together being in the school, but I think even more important, at least for me, is to develop also on the personal side. And more than that, it's important to me, and I think to everyone here in this room, that we all made true friends. And I'm very happy to see so many familiar faces today here, and I'm looking forward to our discussions we already had, and we want to continue tonight. As I said, there's more to come today. Hope so, same for you. So now being alumnus of the school and working in the banking industry, I feel a great network is a major thing. It's very important, and often if you look for solutions, it's even crucial to have a strong and a good connected network. By the Frankfurt School Alumni Association constitution, one of those things which we are aiming for is to bring the members of the association and the alumnus and alumni from Frankfurt School together to connect each other, as just said by Lisa, around Germany in our local hubs, around the world, be it locally in person or be it online, what we are offering. So let me go back to 12 months last year. I was standing here and explained that we have our 25th anniversary as the association. So with our 25th birthday, we decided to put up an agenda and fulfill some key initiatives that we want to follow within the next years. So recap again from last year, we wanted to digitalize our offerings as the association. We wanted to establish a cooperation agreement with the Frankfurt School, with the alumni relations team. And the third thing, last but not least, is of course we also want to grow in terms of number of our members in the association. And today, 12 months later, I'm here and say we made great progress in every single initiative. Whereas we're currently working on the rollout of a fully digital online community platform that's hopefully coming up soon. The second thing, as Lisa and Niels already mentioned, we signed a cooperation agreement November last year, whereas currently are working intensively of bringing this into life. And as one of the great benefits we're already seeing is that we have a much closer connection to the current students, whereas in the last couple of weeks, the new master intakes, bachelor intakes, and next week the new MBA intake will start. With our strong connection now, we are present in all of the beginning sessions, and we could, which is a super high number from my point of view, already find more than 400 students that signed up for our membership in the association. Yeah, in our close collaboration, it's also planned to even grow the network of 3,500 alumni members even further. And by doing so, we want to continue to support the current students with scholarships. Professor Stieglitz mentioned the hardship fund. We as the association were one of the first who participated in this fund and took on to participate even more in other initiatives. Professor Stieglitz also mentioned the study cubes. You can see later on in the campus tour those study cubes, not only in Frankfurt, but also in the local hubs of Frankfurt School, were sponsored and financed by us, by the Alumni Association. And even more important to me, where we want to work on, where we want to give greater benefits, besides the networking and all the events, is when you look to our members. And as an example for that, I will take the zipper which is lying here, and hopefully everyone already know the zipper. The zipper was handed to all our alumni members today, which is, I think, one of the benefits you're receiving today, besides the free welcome drink at the alumni community party right afterwards. Having said that, on the other hand, looking to all those who are not members of the association yet, we only had those warm waffles outside for you guys, but hopefully you pretty much enjoyed them as well. And I think it gets even better for those non-members yet. I think we still have some zippers left outside. Yeah. So who is interested now, not because of the zipper maybe, or maybe just because of the zipper, but also maybe because of our great benefits we're also having. You can come and see us outside after the farewell, and straight sign up for membership. And I think if the zippers are running out, which I hope, we will send them afterwards back home to you. So make sure to cross us by when leaving the Audimax and not being alumni already with the membership in the association. So when finishing my speech, I want to once more say a big thank you on behalf of the whole association and its members, to its members here in the audience and those who cannot come here today, because as an association that is non-profit and founded by the membership fees, all what I just outlined and what we are currently planning together with Frankfurt School is only possible because of you. So thank you, enjoy the rest of the night and the evening, and see you hopefully all next year.
Thank you very much, Jens. I don't want to keep you any longer away from drinks, but I have 3 more points to mention. Sorry for this. But I think the first one is a very important one. To continue our tradition, I'm very happy to announce the date for next year's Alumni Homecoming, which I hope you save the date already in your calendars now. That will be 1st of July 2023. So save the date in your calendars. Second, also a big thank you from my side to the organizing team, especially Judith Georgi, for organizing this with a lot of effort and dedication, to faculty and alumni who supported us in the workshops, and everyone else supporting today's event. I think, again, this is a big applause. And last but not least, a few housekeeping points. Due to the weather, we don't go for a barbecue on our North Terrace. We will stay in the foyer so that no one is getting cold. There's a lot of things to still experience. There is someone from the mentoring program. If you're interested in that, you can meet one of my colleagues in the foyer. And there's also a tray mix stand from our executive education team where you can grab some of the food and also join a guessing challenge. There's campus tours running where you can also see our brand new study cubes sponsored by the Alumni Association. And after I'm finishing here in the Audimax, we have a special reunion celebration for the classes of 1997, 22, and 2012 with our president and a champagne reception in the executive lounge on the 3rd floor before we all meet back down here in the foyer and celebrate the rest of the evening. But this is not the end of the day. After this, we will go to the Zoom Club. There is buses. So we have organized buses so that you don't have to find your way to the Zoom Club. Buses run between 9:30 and 10 under or next to the presidential building. It's called Präsidialbau. Right before you leave the campus, there's space where the buses will be waiting for you and get you to the Zoom Club. To get free entrance, you need your alumni lanyard, the green one. I have a blue one, but your green one, you need this. And you can grab this one to get free entrance at our club. Free drinks is only for our Alumni Association members, so you might still thinking about joining them. And before ending, thanks everyone for participating today and towards your support towards the school. I wish you a wonderful evening, enjoy the rest of the day, and have a good time. Thank you.